I'm George Galloway, and I present كلمة on Al Mayadeen television. Here we are in London. I speak my words freely, either in Parliament, on television, here on the streets of London. كلمة means free word. That's what I speak. So كلمة is a two-way conversation. Check it out on Al Mayadeen television. Welcome to كلمة with me, George Galloway, for Al Mayadeen television, coming to you from London tonight with an audience of distinguished experts and one or two gifted amateurs like me. We're here to talk about the Kurdish people. Now, this is a long and tortuous story, so we better start not at the beginning and not at the end, but right in the middle, in the immortal words of Lord Geoffrey Archer, who was a British member of the House of Lords, who took a very great interest for a very small period of time in the plight of the Kurdish people. He explained it to us perfectly on British television. He said, well, you see, there are good Kurds and there are bad Kurds. The good Kurds are the ones in Iraq opposing Saddam Hussein. The bad Kurds are the ones in Turkey challenging the hegemony of Ottoman rule in present-day Turkey. They're bad Kurds, and we must have nothing to do with them, he said, but we must do everything that we can for the good Kurds in Iraq. This, in a nutshell, exemplifies the hypocritical, opportunistic way in which the West has viewed the Kurdish people and their legitimate rights to national self-determination. But the collaboration with that kind of mentality by some Kurdish leaders in different places from time to time has played a part in, as you will see from our vox pops, that we had to take a long time out on the streets of London today to get some answers. There is a complete lack of clarity and understanding about those legitimate rights. What are those legitimate rights? The Kurdish people are a nation. They have rights of national self-determination. They are more than 40 millions, and they are strung across several existing states: Iran, Iraq, Turkey, Syria, and those are just the main centers of the Kurdish population. There's rather a lot of them in North London, as I know as I go around my work in the London mayoral election campaign. Now, at the end of the First World War, not only were their national rights not granted, they weren't even addressed. So, as this is كلمة, as that translates as free word, where every word is free, I will freely state my own point of view, and my audience will no doubt do the same. My point of view is this, that Kurdish national rights can no longer be denied. They can no longer be hidden, and the Kurdish question is a part of the crisscross of crises that exist in the Middle East and the wider region today. Let's take the situation in Syria, for example, but bear with me because it's a little bit complicated. There's one thing that can be said about Erdogan's Turkey. They are not ready to accept Kurdish political self-determination. So, instead of shelling ISIS and Al-Qaeda, instead of invading and trying to crush ISIS and Al-Qaeda, Erdogan's Turkey is trying to crush the Kurdish anti-ISIS, anti-Al-Qaeda fighters. This is because of the complete breakdown in the peace process and negotiations that were proceeding for a time successfully in Turkey between Erdogan and the Kurdish political leadership. Most Kurds in the world are living in Turkey, and they have rights which for decades, in fact more than half a century, were absolutely undermined and crushed underfoot. There was a time when it was a crime, illegal, even to speak the Kurdish language in Turkey. They tried to maintain the various Turkish regimes that the Kurdish people were mountain Turks. That's what they said they were. They weren't Kurds at all. They were mountain Turks. Well, of course, that's fanciful nonsense. A nation is a stable community of people with a common language, a common culture, and a common perception of themselves as a nation. The Kurdish people fit that bill rather well. So, good Kurds, bad Kurds. That's one part of the equation. And most people in the audience are probably with me thus far. This is where they cease to be with me. It is my view that in allowing the big powers to pick them up, put them down, pick them up again, put them down, and behave in an unprincipled, opportunistic manner, but given that everything else is up for grabs in the Middle East at this point in time, given that the Sykes-Picot borders are breaking down, and I'm one who fought for decades for the obliteration of the Sykes-Picot lines, I don't believe that it can be out of the question that the Kurdish people have a state of their own involving all of them in the existing states that they're in. Now that is controversial in your house and in this audience. Let's hear from our distinguished experts. Yes, sir, you're first.
Hi, I'm Mohammed Sharif, a lecturer at the University of Exeter. First of all, I'd like to agree with you. The Kurds do have a right to self-determination. This is entrenched and enshrined in public international law. The Charter of the United Nations 1945 supports this. The International Covenant on Political and Economic Rights supports this, 1966. The International Covenant on Economic, Social and Cultural Rights supports this, 1966. And the Universal Declaration of Human Rights supports this, 1948. So yes, the Kurds have the right to self-determination, and a prominent Kurdish leader by the name of Jalal Talabani used to say in the 90s, "Sharafun la nadda'i wa ittihamun la nanfi," when he was asked about the right to Kurdish self-determination. Obviously, he was being pragmatic at the time. I would make an addition, and that is "Sharafun nadda'i wa ittihamun la nanfi," which means the Kurds definitely want an independent state. This is what the Kurdish people want. And we can see an independent Kurdish state emerging right now in southern Kurdistan, in Iraqi Kurdistan, which has all the components and ingredients of an independent state. It has the territory, the population, the revenues, and the government to allow for an independent state to emerge in the Middle East. As for Rojava, Syrian Kurdistan, which is also known as Western Kurdistan, we can also see the beginnings of an entity. That entity is growing, and possibly, I think, within probably the next few decades, they too will also make such a request. But as far as I know, Rojava is not claiming independence, but is asking for some form of confederalism or some sort of federalism within the Syrian state. The Kurds have to be pragmatic. They have been pragmatic, and the reason, as you suggested, that they have somehow been unclear to various groups and voices is that they have been divided among four enemies. The Kurds in Iraq have been heavily dependent on the Iranian government on occasions. The Kurds in Iran have been heavily dependent on the government in Baghdad. The Kurds in Iraq have been heavily dependent on Ankara. The Kurds in Turkey might have been on occasions dependent on Baghdad, and this has created a situation where the Kurdish leadership
You didn't mention Israel there. Why?
Because for the Kurds, Israel has not been a major issue.
No, that's not true.
It hasn't been a major issue.
Israel's been collaborating with the Kurdish people for decades.
Yes.
To cause trouble for the Arabs.
Well, Israel has been collaborating, but not in an obvious way, and it has never been
well, you're
the
a
intention.
Professor. It may not have been in an obvious way, but it must have been obvious to you.
Yes, but the thing is, it has never been at a large scale, first of all, and secondly, the Kurdish leadership has always been conscious of their Arab brothers living in the region, and they have always been supportive of the Palestinian cause. Just to give you an example.
You're sure about that?
Yes, I am sure about that. I'll give you an example. I was in a meeting with a very senior Kurdish leader, and a very senior diplomat from the West attended that meeting. I was, to be honest, as an academic, I was quite surprised when this Kurdish leader said, if you want a solution to the Middle East, you have to think about the Palestinians. I don't want to give you the name of the Kurdish leader, and I don't want to give you the name of the senior Western diplomat, but I saw this with my own eyes. Yes.
But isn't Kurdish oil ending up in Israel right now?
Well, that's not the issue. The issue is Kurdistan.
It's my issue. I'm raising it with you.
I know, but it should not be an issue for anyone, because
it doesn't invalidate Kurdish national rights.
Exactly.
It's just that you mentioned a number of foreign powers, but
yes.
you didn't mention
but
Israel, and I asked you why.
You have a produce, you want to sell it. It could be Israel, it could be Algeria, it could be the United Kingdom.
But I thought you were thinking about the Palestinians. You don't see any contradiction in Kurdish oil going through Turkey to Israel, fueling the murder incorporated in Tel Aviv that is murdering Palestinians. You don't see that as a big issue?
I do see that an issue. But
you must know it's an issue in the Arab world.
It's an issue in the Arab world, and the Kurds have been good friends with the Arabs for many decades. We are religiously similar, culturally similar. And when we ask for the right to self-determination, it is not a request based on our anger or animosity towards the Arab, but rather as a human right.
No, I accept that. I accept that.
And the right to self-determination.
Your national rights stand independently of your politics towards different parts of the world. I accept that.
Yes.
I started out by saying that. But the practicality of moving forward is influenced by the foreign relations of different Kurdish parties at different times. You must accept that also.
But I have to add, I mean, I think the United States is more of a major player in that respect as opposed to Israel. I'm quite surprised that you bring in Israel as a major player in this issue.
Well, you don't know me very well if you're quite surprised by that. Yeah. But look, I'll come back to you. You've made an excellent contribution to begin. Let's hear from Sabah next to you. Sabah?
Thank you very much, George. I agree with most of the things that you said regarding the right of the Kurdish people for self-determination. In fact, if you look at the statements by the Iraqi socialist movement all alone, you'll find that actually they upheld the right of the Kurdish people for self-determination, including independence. And this, the position has been taken by a lot of Iraqi leftist parties for such a long time. And in fact, one of the
autonomy or some self-determination of some sort within the unity of the Syrian government. The Kurds in Iraq are divided. Masoud Barzani has recently asked for a referendum for separation, but Jalal Talabani and the Goran are not in agreement with him. The main reason why he is asking for a referendum now is because he is no longer the leader of the Kurdish autonomous region. His term of office finished. And he is just absolutely nothing, but he wants to stay as the leader of the Kurdish region for life. The other parties are not agreeing with him, so he's trying to bribe them and saying that if I stayed the leader, I could make a referendum and win the election. Jalal Talabani and Goran are saying you have no right even to ask for a referendum because your term of office, according to the Kurdish constitution, your term of office is finished, and therefore we should have another leader in which you have no right to include yourself by constitution, and then we will decide whether we are having a referendum or not. Secondly, The Kurdish region has received $100 billion since 2003 from the Iraqi government, but it's now bankrupt. It has been unable to pay the salaries of the civil servants and of Peshmerga for the last 6 months, according to the Reuters news agency. And he has gone so weak that he has humbly accepted an offer by Baghdad government to give all the oil produced in the Kurdish area to Baghdad government, and in return Baghdad government will pay for the salaries of the civil servants. Thirdly, the Kurds in the region, the Turkish Kurds certainly are against him because he has collaborated with the Erdogan government in his fight against the Kurdish people, the PKK, and also he has collaborated with Erdogan to attack Kobani in Syria. And these groups are definitely afraid of him because he is so much associated with Erdogan of Turkey that if he had a so-called independence, he will certainly ally himself with Turkey against the Kurds in Turkey.
Well, look,
and especially...
I'll come back to you later, Professor, but I have to take a break now. But I think we've heard enough to vindicate my opening statement that this is complicated. I'll be right back. You're watching كلمة حرة on Al Mayadeen Television with me, George Galloway, coming to you from London. We're discussing the Kurdish question in the round. Now, I've outlined my own view. 3 of my experts have given theirs, and there are many more experts and distinguished and gifted amateurs too. But we took the Kalima Hurra camera out onto the streets of London earlier today. Take a look at this.
Kurdistan separation from Iraq?
Yes, I think every single Kurdish people agree with that. And this is the only Kurdish dream, I think.
Yes, of course, yeah.
Of course, that's our dream. I think it's a complicated issue.
Always it's going to be a bit messy because I don't think the Kurds are ready for independence.
At the moment, with the crisis that's going on in Kurdistan, nobody's agree with it.
Yes.
With Iraq and the whole region fighting ISIS, do you think it's a good idea for Kurdistan to have the independence or to stay united with Iraq?
I mean, even if we go independent or stay like this, it doesn't matter for us. We have our boys, our Peshmerga fighting ISIS, fighting terrorists.
We are fighting against ISIS by ourselves. I mean, Iraqi army won't help us in any how.
If the ISIS want to be fight with the Kurdish, so of course, so what are we going to do?
No one can survive alone.
It's not something to do with the Kurds, but I think the Kurds are paying the heavy price just to be the part of, let's see, more westernized support.
It might create some issues.
It might create some issues. I suppose that partly sums up where we are. It's already creating some issues here in the audience tonight. We have some measure of agreement, but some measure of difference. Let's hear from another of our experts. Welcome, sir.
مساء الخير جورج، أنا اسمي جوان رشاد، أنا حاليا طالب بجامعة بريطانيا في لندن. أتفق أنا مع زملائي في كثير من النقاط التي أثاروها عن مسألة الشعب الكردي وحق الشعب الكردي. أنا إنسان أؤمن بأن من حق كل إنسان أن يكون حرا وديمقراطيا، وأن لا يتعرض إلى أي اضطهاد بسبب لون بشرته أو بسبب دينه أو مذهبه أو عرقيته. ولكن المشكلة هنا ليست القضية الكردية كما تطرح على الساحة في الوقت الحالي. المشكلة في القيادات الكردية للأسف. القيادات الكردية لا تختلف كثيرا عن القيادات العربية في المنطقة، والتي نعرف عنها الكثير أنها قيادات عميلة ومتآمرة، وهي أدوات بيد القوى الإمبريالية وخاصة الولايات المتحدة الأمريكية. أنا ما أستغربه من بعض القيادات الكردية وخاصة في شمال العراق، وبالتحديد سياسة السيد مسعود البرزاني، هو مجرد أداة في يد أمريكا للأسف. يعني لم يتعلموا من التاريخ. الولايات المتحدة الأمريكية استخدمت القضية الكردية في المنطقة، وعندما انتهت الورقة التي استخدمتها الولايات المتحدة الأمريكية رمت في تلك الورقة في المزابل، لأن الولايات المتحدة في منطقتنا في الشرق الأوسط للأسف لا تتعامل مع شركاء وأصدقاء، وإنما تتعامل مع عملاء وأذيال لها. وهنالك يعني أمثلة متعددة منها شاه إيران. شاه إيران كان الرجل الأول لأمريكا وكان اليد اليمنى لأمريكا. عندما انتهى دور شاه الإيران، أمريكا لم تمنح شاه إيران حتى حق اللجوء السياسي، ليس لأنه كان يحتاج اللجوء السياسي. شاه إيران سرق المليارات من إيران، ولكن انتهى دوره سياسيا فرمته أمريكا إلى المزابل. وحاليا في مصر كما حدث مع حسني مبارك. حسني مبارك كان رجل أمريكا الأول وعميل أمريكا الأول منذ أكثر من 30 سنة. عندما انتهى دور حسني مبارك رمت به إلى مزابل التاريخ. المؤسف أن بعض القيادات الكردية لا تتعلم الدروس من التاريخ، وتقود الشعب الكردي إلى مهلكة، لأنها تقوم بزرع الأحقاد والأضغان والبغائض بين الشعوب والإثنيات في المنطقة. الشعب الكردي من حقه أن يكون شعبا حرا يفتخر بثقافته وبتراثه وبحضارته، وأن يتكلم بدون خوف وبدون اضطهاد من أنه مواطن كردي يخشى أن يتكلم اللغة الكردية. أنا كل ما يأتي من أمريكا يأتي معها إشارة استفهام. كيف أمريكا تقوم بدعم الأكراد في العراق، في شمال العراق؟ ما هو السبب؟ وفي نفس الوقت تغض الطرف عن 25 مليون كردي الذين لم يكن عندهم حتى حقوق الحيوانات قبل فترة قصيرة كما قلت في مقدمتك الكريمة. تركيا فيها 25 مليون كردي. أردوغان المجرم السفاح القاتل الإرهابي داعم داعش والإرهابيين، سارق حلب ومدمر المدارس في سوريا. كل العالم تعرف بأن مجرمي داعش الوهابيين الإرهابيين القتلة أعداء الإنسانية والحضارة والتاريخ يأتون من تركيا إلى سوريا، يقطعون رؤوس البشر، يقتلون البشر والحجر والشجر، وأمريكا تساعد أردوغان وتساعد داعش. فكيف من الممكن أن نصدق بأن تركيا قلبها على الشعب الكردي ومن حق الشعب الكردي أن يقيم دولة؟ لماذا لا تقوم أمريكا بالضغط على الحكومة التركية والمجرم السفاح أردوغان بأن تعطي حقوقا مماثلة للأكراد في تركيا؟ أنا ما يخيفني أن تستخدم القضية الكردية بتآمر بعض القيادات الكردية في العراق وحتى في سوريا. وحتى في سوريا بعض القيادات الكردية تتعامل مع أمريكا ظنا منها بأن أمريكا يوما من الأيام ستساعد القضية الكردية. أمريكا في الشرق الأوسط عندها قضيتان أساسيتان: أولا السيطرة على مصادر الطاقة، وأمن إسرائيل وحماية وسيادة إسرائيل. من المستغرب أن إسرائيل الدورة السرطانية التي زرعت في فلسطين اقتلعت الفلسطينيين من بيوتهم أنها ترأف بالشعب الكردي. فكيف قلب إسرائيل على الشعب الكردي المضطهد المظلوم وهي نفسها قامت باضطهاد الشعب الفلسطيني وطردته من بلده؟ للأسف القيادات الكردية كبقية القيادات العربية في المنطقة قيادات عميلة ومتآمرة، ونتيجة تعاملها وسياساتها الخاطئة أخشى ما أخشاه أن يدفع الشعب الكردي الثمن ثانية وثالثة.
Professor, please respond.
Thank you. First of all, I'd like to say that it has never happened that a nation asks or requests an invitation from neighboring powers for the right to self-determination. I think this is a very strange assertion where members of the audience have suggested this. The Kurds deserve the right to self-determination, and they will go ahead with the right to self-determination. And with regard to the referendum issue, As far as I know, on the 1st of March 2015, the Parliament of the Kurdistan region of Iraq established an independent electoral commission, which has been assigned the duty of organising a referendum. This referendum does not necessarily have to be very soon, and the Kurdish leadership has tried to be pragmatic in the way it has dealt with the situation. And just one other point, in January 2005, an unofficial referendum was held in the Kurdistan region of Iraq, where 98.9% of the Kurdish people voted unofficially for independence. And just to add another point,
what was the turnout, incidentally?
It was very, very large, very large. I mean, it coincided with the Iraqi national elections and the parliamentary elections. I mean, I myself was in Iraqi Kurdistan at the time. There were stalls outside each polling station where everyone would go and vote for the official elections and come out and vote for the referendum. As with regards to the issue of self-determination, Kurdistan's independence, I beg to differ with my colleagues. I think all political parties in Iraqi Kurdistan, in southern Kurdistan, agree that we have the right to self-determination. And as I said, the referendum does not necessarily have to be conducted anytime soon. And even if it is, I see no problem. I mean, we have the example of East Timor. The referendum was held in 1999, but the actual declaration was in 2002. And also with regards to Kurdish leaders being pawns or agents of the West, I strongly believe this is
not just the West. I didn't say just the West.
Or even regional powers. I think this
Some are agents of Saddam.
This is a rather simplistic assertion, and also I find it very strange if the Kurds have the right to self-determination, when is the right time to declare the right to self-determination? If, as a member of the audience suggested, my colleague to the right, that this is the wrong time, the region is in a bad situation. Well, when have the Arabs or the other ethnicities or the major powers of the region suggested, well, this is the right time, let the Kurds declare independence? It has never happened, it will never happen, so the Kurds have to decide for themselves.
The Kurdish right to self-determination is absolute, it's indivisible, it doesn't depend on anyone else. It's not something that is related to your foreign policy, it's not something that's related to whoever is your leaders or claim to be your leaders. It's an absolute right. And as far as I'm concerned, you can self-determine anytime you like. It's your business. The problem is if it's going to be more than just a statement of aspiration. How do you actually bring it about? And that requires negotiation, that requires relationships with other forces and powers. And it's my view, and I think we've heard quite a bit tonight that illuminates this point, is my view that the best thing is always the principled thing. That being unprincipled, being opportunistic, never actually works. I don't know if it's divine providence or what, but it never actually works. You see, there's a lot of people watching this program tonight who are very disappointed to hear me supporting the right of the Kurds to self-determination. But I can do no other, because to do other would be unprincipled and opportunistic. So I must stick to principles I've held all my life. I can't have a different set of principles for Kurds than I do for anyone else. But the point that your fellow professor made seemed an extraordinarily powerful one to me, that the leadership of the Kurds in Iraq are collaborating with the murderer of Kurds in Ankara. And the division that that indicates or illustrates, if it's true, you may deny it, is one that is going to cripple your project. It's going to completely undermine your project, don't you think?
First of all,
yes, after
First of all, I'd like to say with regards to the enterprise of independence, there can be an amicable divorce between Arab Iraq and the Kurdistan region. Negotiations, peaceful negotiations can be held between Baghdad and Erbil on a par with what happened in Czechoslovakia in 1993, a velvet divorce. It's not impossible, it can happen, and the border areas between Arab Iraq and Kurdistan have to be stipulated and agreed upon. Obviously, you can't declare independence without identifying which territories you're going to control, and that can easily happen. As with regards to your point with the Kurdish leadership, as I mentioned earlier on, as an academic, a political scientist, it's all about political pragmatism. Obviously, I'm not here to defend the Kurdish leadership because I'm here as an academic, but political pragmatism requires that, for example, the Kurds in Iraqi Kurdistan have good relations with Tehran and Ankara, and even previously with Damascus.
Even when they're killing your compatriots.
Well, this is the problem. This is one of the most...
That's not pragmatism, Professor.
It is one of the most difficult misfortunes that have happened to the Kurdish people. It's a very difficult situation, but you could also make the positive point that the Kurdish leadership in Iraqi Kurdistan played a very positive role towards their brethren in northern Kurdistan and Turkish Kurdistan when the peace process was underway. The Turks needed the Iraqi Kurds to help move the peace process forward, and the Kurds in Iraq obviously were very happy to play that role.
Well, Professor, you'll be in next to answer that, but not quite yet, because I have to take another break. I'll be right back. You're watching كلمة with me, George Galloway, on Al Mayadeen Television, coming to you from London, talking about the Kurdish question. Professor, right of reply.
My friend is assuming that self-determination only means separation and statehood. Now, there are in this world so many states, and especially in the Middle East, who are officially considered as states, but in fact they are under the thumb and the Americans and the British.
Most of them.
The only two countries who have approved Masoud Barzani's proposal of complete separation is Netanyahu of Israel and the Prime Minister of Hungary, who is a well-known American friend. That is one thing. The second thing is, we Kurds, before we have self-determination or independence, we want work, we want bread. According to Reuters statistics, 25% of the Kurds in the Kurdistan of Iraq are unemployed now. There is a deficit of $780 million deficit every month in the budget of Kurdish government of Erbil, because they can't pay the salary of their people. The Kurdish Masoud Barzani has gone so far as to allow 2 military bases for Turkey in his area. One in Bamarni to attack the PKK, and the other one in Bashika to defend, to attack the Kurds in Syria, in fact, because they are near there. So they are not the ones. And we have to remember, if we are talking about self-determination, Jalal Talabani himself stated, after he became the president, that Kurdish independence is a dream. It cannot be happening. All we want to have is our right to decent living like everybody else. But therefore, this in no way means separation. Masoud Barzani is saying it because he has gone bankrupt. He has been there for long enough. According to the constitution, he should go, but he's trying to use this as an excuse so that he can stay for life, as is the case with the leader of Palestine.
Well, of course, I was just going to make that point, that he won't be the only leader in the region who outstayed his mandate, but at least he had a mandate. Most of the leaders in the Arab world don't have any mandate at all. Let me take, please, some of the backbenchers. Yes, sir.
Hi, my name's Ali. I'm an Iraqi filmmaker. The question I want to ask is, the last time we heard a 98 or a 99% turnout of
I
a
never
vote,
like 98 point something turnout.
the last
I've
time
got to
we
say
heard
that,
it in the Middle
Professor.
East was Saddam Hussein's dictatorship. Now, unless you're saying that's a democracy and Barzani's where everyone turned up, then I don't see a 98% turnout. But the question I'm going to ask is, why is it an Iraqi Kurdistan issue when Iraq has constantly been a friend to the Kurds and helped them, and on several occasions they've been the hand that fed them and the hand that kind of helped their parliament, and even to one of the statements was that Al-Abadi has given money in turn for return of oil which belongs to Iraq in the first place. The other question is, why aren't the Kurds of the Turkish area saying anything? Why is it just Barzani's voice that's being kind of spread out?
Okay, let's hear some more backbench opinion.
My name is Yusra Mahdi and I'm a journalist and I'm an Iraqi myself. Just when Barzani made his announcement for a referendum, Iran also said that this is a Zionist project. And I wanted to know what the experts think of that. Is it a Zionist project or not?
Well, look, the fact that Netanyahu supports it doesn't invalidate it. The fact that the Prime Minister of Hungary supports it, whilst unusual, doesn't invalidate it either. I'm Scottish. I fought for many years, decades, for home rule for Scotland. Not for independence, not for the breakup of the country, but for autonomy across a whole range of important issues for the people of Scotland. My own personal advice to the Kurdish people, if they asked for it, would be to go for something like that in all the countries in which they live, and some kind of confederal relationship between each other. But that, of course, is easy to say and not easy to get. But there isn't any doubt that Netanyahu wants to break the Middle East up into hundreds of emirates based on confession, based on sect, based on religion, or in this case, based on a nationality that is present within various Arab and non-Arab countries. Iran and Turkey are in this important debate too. That's a fact, but it doesn't invalidate the rights of the Kurdish people. That's the point I'm constantly trying to make.
أنا جاسم محمد معروف من العراق. بالحقيقة اللي أشوفه أنا الآن هي أزمة هوية نعاني بها بالمنطقة. وهذه الأزمة الهوية جاي تنعكس على الحياة اليومية للناس. فالمشكلة ويا القيادات الكردية ما جاي يتركون فرصة للعراق وللدولة العراقية أن تستقر. فنلاحظ بأن في الوقت اللي في بغداد نشوف بأن الأكراد ماخذين مواقع في الدولة وإدارة الدولة، لكن تعاملهم مع الوضع العراقي اللحظة ما يسمح أنه للدولة أن تأخذ طابعها حتى تقوم بمهماتها ووظائفها تجاه الناس. من الأمور الملفتة من نقول يعني أزمة هوية، احنا ما نتصور بأن هناك فرصة بالوقت الحاضر لقيام دولة كردية. كل المعطيات، بأن حتى المعطيات الاقتصادية اللي تكلم عليها البروفيسور كمال، وحتى الوضع المعاشي والوضع الاجتماعي السياسي، ما يجوز أنه نهمل بأنه الآن في كردستان العراق هناك انقسام، وانقسام حاد سياسي بين القيادات الكردية. نلاحظ بأنه تحالفات الأكراد في أربيل تحالف لهم واضح مع الأتراك، لكن في السليمانية وجلال إلى تحالف وعلاقات قديمة مع إيران. طبعا هنا جاي نشوف حتى دورهم من كان قبل مع صدام حسين، لعبوا دور هو أشبه ما يكون انتهازي. يمارسون ضغوط على صدام حسين، لكن بنفس الوقت هم عندهم استعداد أن يروحون إلى صدام حسين ويلتقون به. لاحظنا هذا في أزمة أربيل من 96. الإشكال بأن القيادات الكردية الآن علاقتها مع الشعب الكردي. كل الأخبار اللي تقول وكل المعلومات بأن مسعود البرزاني جاي يواجه مشاكل في علاقته مع الشعب الكردي أو مع داخل حتى الحزب الديمقراطي الكردستاني. حزب جلال الطلباني واجه انشقاق، وانشقاق قوي، وظهرت من عنده حركة التغيير، وهذه حركة التغيير اليوم استحوذت على النسبة الكبيرة في داخل السليمانية وفي مناطق السليمانية. يعني بكل اختصار أنا ما أتصور بأن هناك الآن هي القضية المطروحة قضية دولة كردية أو حق تقرير مصير للشعب الكردي، لأن المعطيات والعوامل الداخلية الكردية ما توصل إلى هاي النتيجة. لكن اللي تحاول القيادات الكردية أن تبقى أولا على هذه العروش اللي هي امتلكتها، وأنه بنفس الوقت بأن تحاول أن تسيطر على أكبر ما يمكن من الإيرادات النفطية والوضع المالي الكردي. أنا استغرب من صديقنا من يقول بأنه القيادات الكردية ما لها علاقة مع إسرائيل. هذا شيء ما يمكن، يعني لأنه الأستاذ محمود عثمان تحدث عن هذا بالتفصيل، وقال عن عدد زيارات، وقال بأنه شخصية كردية باستمرار تقوم بزيارة للكيان الصهيوني. العلاقات الكردية الإسرائيلية هي موجودة، فليش التنكر إلها؟ يعني ما أشوف لها سبب. طبعا احنا لهمنا أن ننظر الآن، أنا كعراقي لهمني بأن الوضع في العراق يستقر. استقرار الوضع بالعراق يمكن تكون هناك تنمية، يمكن تكون هناك حالة إعمار، يمكن الدولة تكون لها هيبة. احنا عندنا مشكلة في العراق، هي مشكلة الآن الأمن والإرهاب والوضع المعاش المتردي، البلد ما حد يعرف إلى أي اتجاه ماشي. النقطة الأخيرة اللي أقولها الملفت بالممارسات للقيادات الكردية في الوقت اللي هم يخاطبون شعبهم، هذه إشكالية، بأنه عندهم خطابين. أكو خطاب للشعب الكردي ويتعاملون معاه على أساس إثارة المشاعر القومية بوعود مثل وعد تقرير مصير، دولة مستقلة إلى ما ذلك. لكن بنفس الوقت هم يتعاملون مع الوضع العراقي بطريقة العام بطريقة أخرى، من أطراف اللي تكون بينها وبين الحكومة، حكومة مثل المالكي السابقة وحتى الحكومة الحالية، مشاكل تكون كردستان أو أربيل هي ملجأ لهم، ومن هذا الملجأ ومن هذه القاعدة يبدون يتحركون ضد الحكومة في بغداد. طيب بنفس الوقت يتعاملون مع الوضع العراقي أيضا من خلال التحالفات. عندما يكون هناك تأزم بين العراق مثلا وتركيا، يكونون هم عامل يساهم في تصعيد هذا التأزم. لاحظنا بأن حتى تحركهم الآن، وهذا دور لازم نعتز به، بأنه في دحر داعش. لكن نشوف هذا الدحر لداعش أو سيطرتهم على مناطق في نينوى مثل سنجار وإلى غيرها، وحتى في كركوك، يريد يفرضوها كأمر واقع، بأنه هذه الأراضي اللي هم استطاعوا أنه يخرجون من عندها أو يدفعون داعش إلى خارجها، تصبح مناطق للتفاوض، وليس للتفاوض، ولا يعتبرونها حتى هذه، وإنما هي مناطق كردية. طبعا احنا كل اللي أريد أتكلم عنه أنا يهمني المستقبل ويهمني استقرار العراق. هذه السياسات، هذه الممارسات، هذا الدور اللي تقوم به القيادات الكردية ما راح يخدم لا الشعب الكردي. الشعب الكردي يعيش. اكو بطاله مثل ما يقول عنها الدكتور كمال.
Let the professor respond please to that.
I'd like to thank my colleague for those interesting comments, but what he failed to mention with regards to Dr. Mahmoud Usman's reference to Kurdish-Israeli relations. True, Dr. Mahmoud Usman refers to a visit by the Kurdish leadership to Tel Aviv in 1968, in 1973. But what my colleague failed to represent and mention here is that Dr. Mahmoud Usman himself, in an article I read, said, I asked Mullah Mustafa Barzani, why do you think having relations with Israel is something that we should consider? To which Mullah Mustafa Barzani replied, he said, actually the reason for that is I want to build a bridge to Washington and hopefully Israel will help to do that. It was never about Israel. And one other thing which I found quite fascinating and strange in this debate, Israel is irrelevant. We are talking about the right of self-determination for the Kurds, Israel, Algeria, whatever. It is irrelevant. We are talking about the Kurds and their right to self-determination. And another issue, Mr. Galloway.
No, I'll come back to you, but let me respond to that point, and then I'll let you back in again. It is irrelevant to the Kurdish people's right of self-determination. On that, you're correct. But it's not irrelevant to their prospects of achieving it. Because it is, I must tell you candidly, this shameful relationship makes it almost impossible for most Arabs to view favorably the legitimate demands of the Kurdish people. Can't you see?
I respectfully disagree. First of all, it's not shameful. Why is it not shameful for the Arabs to have relations for Israel? There are embassies in Cairo, in Amman. There is no Israeli embassy or consulate in Erbil. So I see a bit there's a bit of hypocrisy here, I see. That's one point.
But as long as we're agreed on that, it is shameful that there is an Israeli embassy in Cairo and in Amman.
But
it is therefore also shameful.
But there is none in Erbil. There is none in Erbil.
It is also shameful. If the first two are shameful, the third must be shameful.
Well, that's a hypothetical assumption. There is no Israeli consulate or embassy in Erbil. And also, Mr. Gallo, to go back on to one of our colleagues, I mean, what colleague at the back bench suggested that Iraq had provided all the rights to the Kurds. That is absolutely untrue, absolutely inaccurate. The Kurds have been suppressed by successive Iraqi regimes from Baghdad. And it was in February 2014 that Maliki's government refused to send Kurdistan's share of the national budget. That's when the economic crisis started. Also, Professor next to me talks about various domestic problems. All countries around the world have domestic problems, economic problems and various issues. And with regards to there being divisions amongst political parties, as my colleague to the right suggested, there are divisions among political parties in the United States, in Germany and the United Kingdom. But when it comes to the national cause of Kurdistan, I can promise you there is a unanimous agreement.
There's not unanimous agreement in the audience tonight. I'll come back to you.
Just one other point.
I've got to break. It's break time. I'll be right back. You're watching كلمة with me, George Galloway, coming to you from London, but discussing the Kurdish question. We took the camera out, as I told you earlier, onto the streets of London to hear from the public. Watch this.
In the Middle East is backing up the whole idea of Kurdish people to have their independence. Why is that?
Well, I don't know, but it's not a crime to have a relation with Israel.
Could be to destabilize the region.
Making other Muslim country against us. That's the only thing I could see right now.
I don't think the Kurdistan get any benefits from Israel.
Israel has been a good friend to Kurdistan. They have been supporting us for a while back, and I'm sure they will go on about it as well.
What do you think the effect will be on the rest of the region?
That I don't know, to be honest.
So I think it will affect the entire area.
But I think for them, when the Kurds get independence or no, they don't have to talk about it. It's a national issue.
At the end of it, they have to cope with it.
I think it will have adverse effects because once if Kurdistan separates, I think there will be other, other separation movements.
We will be on crisis, which is we have never ever faced it before, and the whole country will go down.
Well, an unabashed stance largely on the Israel front, but I don't want to concentrate on that now. In this last segment, Professor, please finish your point, but tell me this, the answer to that last question. What will be the impact on the region if Iraqi Kurdistan breaks away and forms a separate state?
Well, first of all, I mean, Iraqi Kurdistan can be a positive influence in the region. It's already evolving. I'm not saying it's perfect. There are the institutions of government. There are attempts at improving this. And when it comes to the issue of various domestic problems, these obviously will be addressed and challenged and changed as things progress. I mean, I can definitely tell you that the Kurdistan of 1992 of today is quite different to the Kurdistan of 1992. And one other thing that I feel that my colleagues failed to point out is that the Kurds of Iraq do not see themselves as Iraqis. The generation that were born after 1991 do not speak Arabic at all. They would not understand a sentence in Arabic. They do not have an Iraqi identity. And I'd just like to go back to a famous quote by King Faisal I in 1932 in a private memo to his cabinet colleagues, where he said, it is with great regret that there are no Iraqis inside Iraq. I can tell you today that there are no Iraqis inside Iraq. The Kurds of Iraq do not see themselves as Iraqis. And with regards to the colleague at the backbench who said, I'm not quite sure, who was cynical about the 98.9%, can I just tell the audience, yourself and him, that actually the Kurdish leadership in January 2005 were against the referendum for independence, the unofficial one, because they thought it was politically incorrect to have a referendum for independence side by side with national elections for the Iraqi parliament. It was only after a group of activists moved forward and these sort of in unofficial polling stations stalls were held outside the official ones. Okay. So it was absolutely genuine.
Dr. Sabah.
Briefly regarding the relationship with Israel, I think it's very difficult actually to deny the link and the influence that Israel has on the Kurdish region in northern Iraq. There are many confirmed links between the government and Kurdistan and the Zionist lobbies in the United States. In fact, they advocate the so-called Kurdish interest in the United States and lobby on behalf of the Kurdish regions, and also they got advisors who are key members of the occupation of Iraq administrations in 2003, and they become very much involved in the policies of Kurdistan and the relationship between the government of Kurdistan and the central government. The advice to the Kurdish region was no matter what kind of fight you pick up with Baghdad, Baghdad is going to be the loser. And they implemented this policy ever since 2003. They are poisoning the atmospheres between Arabs and beside actually the relationship with Israel is against the Iraqi law. And so far, I believe Kurdistan is still part and parcel of Iraq, even before independence and referendum. Kurdistan is supposed to be part of Iraq, and actually to establish relationship with Israel against the Iraqi law, because there is an Iraqi law forbid anybody from Iraq to have a relationship, to travel to Israel, and so on. And therefore, they are breaking the law by establishing such a link with Israel. And beside, as I said earlier, 2/3 of the Israeli requirement of oil come from Kurdistan. Why would a Kurdish government in Iraq Kurdistan establish this favorable trade deals with Israel, considering Israeli past in the area and their plotting and conspiracies against the entire Arab nations, not only in Iraq but in the Middle East.
They're obviously giving it away too cheap, because the government in Kurdistan, we heard, is bankrupt.
I've been told actually they sell Iraqi oil for the price of $15 to $20 per barrel, which is much lower than market.
I'll try to come back to you, but I want to get others in. The gentleman at the back.
Yeah, just to state back to the gentleman at the front. He said that there is no Israeli intelligence or anyone working in the region, in the Kurdish region in Iraq. Well, Le Figaro, which is France's second largest newspaper, has stated that the Israeli intelligence agencies are recruiting and training Iranian dissidents in the clandestine bases located in Iraq's Kurdistan region. Now, onto that is Iraq and Israel are technically still at war from the first war that they've had. They have never been under a peace process or anything. So why is it that Kurdistan chooses to kind of work and collaborate with Iraq's enemies? You have the problem we have with the Turks, and they've allowed the bases in Iraq. Then you have the Israelis, they've allowed the bases to work with them. So are they like, I don't know, just...
No, okay. To be fair to the professor, he didn't say there weren't any Israeli intelligence operating in Kurdistan. He said there was no embassy or consulate. And I said, well, there's scarcely a need. Gentleman here.
Yeah, I'm going to quickly comment on what my honorable friend said, and I will disagree with his introduction that I do not believe that the Iraqi Kurd leadership in Iraq do represent the entire Kurdish population. They just proclaim to do so. What is worrying, they haven't gained no independence, they do not have a state. It's like a privately run corporation and a family. I mean, as far as I know, Masoud al-Barazani has been a leader in his party for the last 40 years, and he's been a leader of Kurdistan, Iraq for the last 15, 20 years. And next to him, his right-hand man is his nephew, Nishirvan Barazani. And now he's trying to set his son to overtake from him. So I do not think he is sincere and genuine having a Kurdish cause at heart. I think he's running a private corporation, private businesses. And secondly, and more worryingly, if he is so sincere and genuine about the Kurdish cause, how can he shake the hand, the brutal, murderous Turkish dictator and evil criminal who kills the Kurdish people right now as we speak? Turkish tank and American F-16, the Turkish American F-16, pounding and bombing and killing Kurdish civilian men, and women. How can such an hypocrite man who run the entire nation's interest for his own family's interest, for backyard? And secondly, his best friend is Erdogan, that's evil, murderous dictator and the founder and the godfather of ISIS. Secondly, on our behalf, the Syrian Kurd, nobody has given Masoud Barzani to speak on our behalf. We are very proud to be part of the Syrian Republic. If there are injustice, we will resolve them. We will find a solution, mutual solution, in a peaceful, democratic way between Syrian government and the Kurdish representative. Not everyone is holding a gun and an arm is fighting the Syrian army. As a matter of fact, there has been a lot of collaboration and cooperation between the Kurdish fighters and the Syrian government and the Syrian army. They fought side by side. The Syrian government supplied weapons to them. And thirdly, and very importantly, we as a Kurd from Syria, we will always pride ourselves that our cause is Palestine, the justice for the Palestinian, and done with the Zionist regime, with the Zionist entity in Palestine. We will not be associated and indeed allow anyone to speak in our name, in the Syrian Kurd, to associate us with that Zionist entity, the occupier of Palestine. So I will tell Masoud Barzani and his gangsters, mind your own business. Thank you.
Doctor, Professor.
I'm not going to spend my time about Israel, but I make 2 points. First of all, he said there is no consulate, Israeli consulate in Erbil. That can't happen anyway because Iraq doesn't recognize Israel. If they don't have an embassy in Baghdad, they certainly can't have one in Erbil. That's point one. Point two, only a few months ago, Khosrat Rasoul, the deputy prime minister of Erbil, went to Israel on official basis to make deals on agricultural matters between Israel and the government of Erbil. But I have more important than that. If you believe in the self-determination, you have to respect other nations. I have here a link, if you want to take it, from Amnesty International, a video which you can see on the internet, that in fact the Barzani Peshmergas, having fought Daesh in the disputed areas of Kurdistan, have actually attacked and killed and blown up the houses of many Arab Sunni people in the villages of al-Hadarat and in Sabaya and Nabijat Hamid. These are people who have lived next to us and in villages where there are Kurds and as well as Arabs. The Peshmerga has actually, instead of saving them from Daesh, had entered these villages, kicked out the Daesh and blown up the houses, and the Amnesty International is the best witness to prove that in fact Masoud Barzani is fit to kill. He has killed 10,000 Kurds from Jalal Talabani's group during the fights which has taken place between the two sides, and he is now killing Sunni Arabs in disputed areas, and therefore he is certainly not fit to represent the Kurds. Thank you.
Professor? No. Last word to the professor.
I'm personally quite offended and surprised that the independence of Kurdistan, the independence of 30 million Kurds in the Middle East, is being linked to a state that was created in 1948. This does not intellectually go with reason, and I think the Arabs who think that way, or other people in the region who think that way, should reconsider this position. And also, again, with regards to Arabs being persecuted in Kurdistan, I beg to differ. There are more than 1.8 million Arabs living in Iraqi Kurdistan today. Many professors in Suleimani University, where I used to be a lecturer, are Arabs. They live in every street, every road, every neighborhood. They are respected. They are treated very well, and there has been hardly any criminal instances against displaced or Arab people or Christians living in that area. And with regards to the Kurdish leadership representing everyone, no leadership in any country of the world represents everyone. For example, if Donald Trump becomes the president of America, no one can say that he represents every single person in America. And I think with our brothers in Rojava in Western Kurdistan, I remember very clearly in 1992 in Iraqi Kurdistan, the Kurdish leadership used to ask for federalism. That was the demand, that was the request. and it was only very recently that that evolved to the announcement or the claim to independence. I have spoken to various brothers from Rojava. They have told me that the independence of Kurdistan is their dream, an aspiration and the ultimate goal. But coming from pragmatism and realism, at the moment they are pursuing a different democratic model called democratic confederalism. They are pursuing this model at the moment where all ethnicities and groups living in Rojava are allowed to express their views. They want to stay within Syria at this moment of time, but none of them, the people I've spoken to, have said that they do not want an independent Kurdistan. I can't give you the name of that specific leader, of course, because I don't have his permission. He said the independence of Kurdistan is our dream in Rojava, in Western Kurdistan, but at this moment of time we are pursuing a model called democratic confederalism in which all groups and ethnicities can live within Rojava. Thank you very much.
I told you it was complicated. I've been George Galloway. This has been Free Word, كلمة حرة for Al Mayadeen Television. I hope you enjoyed it.